All right, I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at 10 TV. We're now entering our business update segment where we're going to be talking about evaluating the regulator's role in reforms in the pension sector. And when you speak pension sector in Uganda, the National Social Security Fund comes into mind. It's a financial behemoth holding up to 17 trillion Uganda shillings, and some actors within the economy are concerned that such money cannot be somewhere and they do not have access to it. Those within the corridors of the organization say that money is not seated. There are those who are saying, no, we want that money. But how is it invested is also a question that we shall be asking. I'll be introducing my guest very shortly, but before I do that, let me just give you a preamble to this discussion. Clearly, a lot needs to be done to enhance the capabilities of the Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority, that is URBRA, to enable it to reach more Ugandans and with its services that are geared towards preparing many for retirement through saving, which contributes significantly to the growth of Uganda's economy. As an organization, it's responsible for regulating, establishing, managing operations of retirement benefit schemes for the public and the private sector. How is it faring, especially in light of what is no doubt a tumultuous moment when it comes to pension? We have with us the head of legal at UBRA, Ritah Nansasi, who is here to help us get up to speed with what is happening. You're most welcome to the program, madam.
Thank you.
How are we doing?
Fine, thank you, and good morning.
Great. Regulator, the Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority. Before we get into any other discussion, just give us a preamble of what UBRA is for my viewer out there who might actually be grappling with UBRA.
Thank you. Good morning, our viewers and listeners. My name is Ritah Nansasi. I work at UBRA as the head legal and secretary to the board. UBRA stands for the Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority. This is a government institution set up by an act of parliament that was passed in 2011 to regulate the establishment, management and operation of retirement benefit schemes in Uganda. We regulate both the private and the public sector schemes.
Oh, okay. Well, this discussion comes on the backdrop of a little bit of turmoil within one scheme of those that you manage or have the mandate to look at, the National Social Security Fund. From a regulator's perspective, how have been the last 3 months, especially in light of the news surrounding National Social Security Fund?
Thank you for that question. The public knows well what has been happening, the investigations around the National Social Security Fund. That's one of the schemes that we regulate. And we're all aware it was investigated by Parliament, the report came out. Still, the investigations are still being handled by the IGG. So in that preserve, I may not be able to say a lot about the investigations because we're all aware it's still work in progress and we'll wait for another report. But as a regulator, we know a lot has been happening, but we have also put a lot in place to safeguard members' money and to ensure that members' money is not lost. There are different legal, there's a detailed legal regime that has been put in place, a number of regulations. In particular, there is the investment of scheme funds regulations. This is the regulation that clearly shows the trustees how to invest this money when it's collected. Like you said, people think this money is sitting somewhere. It's actually not seated. It is invested in several asset classes that have been prescribed in the investment, the UBRA investment of scheme funds regulations. Among the asset classes, we have government bonds and securities, and about 70% or to 80% of the NSSF funds are invested in government bonds and securities. We also allow them to invest in private equity, that's up to 60%. They can also invest in real estate, that's up to, private equity is up to 30%, sorry. Real estate can also be up to 30%. Then listed stocks, that's private equity, that's up to 30%. They can also go in unlisted, that's unlisted private equity. Okay. That is a restricted amount, that's up to 15% because that is risky. It's not as safe as those that are listed on the stock exchange. They can also invest in real estate. So just to assure the members that your money is not seated, it's actually invested in approved asset classes, and it's a legal requirement that a fund is only allowed to keep up to 5% in cash. Why they keep
Only
that 5%, only 5% in cash. The rest of the funds should be invested because a member should get a return at the end of it all. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting revelation. Some of us knew it, but of course some people within the audience would be wondering, when you talk about 5%, that should be what the fund has in cash. What if there is a run on NSSF, like government decided that people should be able to get 20%, those that are within the age bracket? What if all these people decided to run at NSSF in one single week and each demands that money? What will happen?
Thank you for that question. Why we say 5%, it's because we know that the people retiring and they'll need their money. Not all the people retire at the same time. So that's why a fund is expected to plan. You know how many people are clocking 55, so you plan for that money in cash or near cash assets, so that when people come, their money is ready. You talked about a run on the fund. For example, in the time of the midterm access, when that amendment was made, the fund had sufficient time to prepare. To have,
more like they have, recalling some investments. You
recall some investments because they have near cash investments. That's why I talked about the different asset classes. For example, the government bonds are long term, but they have those like in equity that is a little short term. In treasury bills and bonds, those are near liquid. So in case members come and they need their money, then the fund can liquidate those near cash assets without having to destabilize the long-term investments. So those times, that's when they have to prepare properly, because you know how many members are coming. We all don't retire at the same time.
Let me not get the regulator to speak on behalf of one of the schemes within the country. They have their own job to do about that. However, they've been in the news, and of course the controversy is one that you should be putting your eyes on. Speaking about the schemes available for government workers, those ones are pretty much very streamlined. Within the private sector, there has been slow adoption of retirement packages or schemes that look at people outside of the corporate employers, the one that go to NSSF. Tell us about how things are looking. What is the landscape like?
Okay, thank you. Currently, we have licensed about 65 retirement benefit schemes, including the 65. NSSF. Yes. So NSSF is just one of the 65. If you visit our website, there are a number of those schemes. Many of these schemes have been set up by corporate entities. So meaning that in addition to what they save for their employees in NSSF, they save over and above the mandatory, and they've set up standalone schemes for their employees. So that if someone is retiring, you have a kitty in NSSF, but you also have a kitty in your in-house or occupational scheme. So those are among the 64. And among these, we also have umbrella schemes. These are schemes where an individual, you and me, can go and make additional contributions.
That's right.
So we think the public is adopting the need to save for retirement over and above what they are compelled to save in the NSSF. Many people are now saving, making additional contributions in the licensed schemes. Although we urge every Ugandan to contribute more and more, because we notice you need money in retirement.
That's right.
To replace your income that you're earning while you're still employed. So if you don't prepare well for your retirement, then you'll be destined to suffer in old age poverty.
So just like you would be advised on a daily to have as many income streams as possible, an average Ugandan is advised too to be part of many schemes of retirement, right?
Yes.
Okay. That is interesting. When you talk about reform in the sector, many have questioned why we have a big actor as like National Social Security Fund, who seems to be enjoying a monopoly, and that perhaps another player with the same size and power should be in there so that reforms can quickly roll out, and perhaps those serving with NSSF can get a better return.
Okay. Thank you. About the reforms in the sector, I'm sure the public heard about the liberalization bill that was intended to reform the sector, to introduce more players in addition to NSSF.
That's right.
But it's still with Parliament. Probably at an opportune time they will reinstate the bill and then take it up. Well, that's the line ministry can better respond to that. But we know that probably the bill is still there, and at an opportune time it will be reinstated. But what I can say about competition is good.
That's right.
And it should be well appreciated, because the members then have a choice. in case of anything, you can better compare like for like, instead of where you have only one provider of a retirement benefits package. And that is why we are seeing the traction picking in the occupational schemes, because members have learned to save over and above what they are mandated to do, to save in the NSSF. And about the reforms, we are also seeing the public service pension scheme coming very soon. And the bill was recently introduced in Parliament to make a contributory retirement benefit scheme for the civil servants. Okay. So we believe once this law is passed, this will also provide an opportunity for the Ugandans in the public service to save for their retirement. And also for the public to note that in the NSSF Act, there are exemptions. For example, the Makerere University Retirement Benefit Scheme was able to get exempted from NSSF. So they have a standalone scheme, well-run scheme.
Because they are Makerere?
Not because they are Makerere. They met the legal requirements to warrant them to get an exemption. So for those schemes that meet the requirements under the NSSF Act, they surely can be exempted, and that exemption is granted by the minister. So that way they can run parallel schemes that offer their members a good return on their investments.
Great. When there were grey areas as the probe was being conducted into issues at National Social Security Fund, there appeared to be a lack of input from UBRA, especially on setting certain aspects clear. As a regulator, you should be able to quickly come in and say, well, here there's a grey area, the scheme or the fund is not answering these questions as they are being put to them. This is what they ought to do. Were you consulted by the MPs?
Yes, we were surely consulted.
To what level?
We were invited to the committee, and therein we were actually required to present our inspection reports, because as a regulator we conduct inspections on all the schemes. So we had, I think, conducted 3 inspections on NSSF, and the committee required us to present our reports. Actually, our reports informed several findings in the report of the committee, because once you go in the fund, we look at all the things they do. We look at their financial statements, we look at the day-to-day operations, but that is notwithstanding the fact that there could be things that you may not be able to see, or new developments that come in. So for sure this probe has revealed a lot of lessons, even for us as a regulator, to be able to improve, to be able to come up with stringent measures. And luckily, during that time, the minister came up with regulations that were amending the several regulations in the URBRA Act. So on 20th January, about 8 new amendments were made to the UBRA regulations. This is to further enhance the role of the regulator, to provide for full disclosure of schemes.
That's right.
Because before there were certain information that could be held back, so that cannot happen anymore. Effective 20th January, schemes are required to fully disclose, including the NSSF. For example, there is a requirement that a scheme that has both mandatory and voluntary contributions in the like of NSSF, they should clearly stipulate in their financial statements how they are handling these monies, how these monies are performing. Right. This was not there before. And there's also a requirement that we've set up clear reporting methodology for investment. How are you investing this money? How do you report? Because it doesn't make sense, you're investing in the same market and you're reporting differently on these investments. All this is intended to make sure that the members' funds are not eroded and to protect the members' benefits. And we've also required schemes to conduct annual general meetings. We know NSSF does this and a number of schemes do this, but we require members to get this information because this is members' money. That's right. Let them have this information, let them ask the questions and get to know how their money is being invested and handled. All right,
as we enter the final bend of this discussion, I would like to bring up a specific example where the regulator ought to come in, especially when a fund or any other scheme in the private sector has fundamentally failed in its role. If an employer is unable to remit this money as required by the law, and NSSF or any other player does not have the mandate to actually get that employer to act, I know there is effort that has been given, including an ultimatum by NSSF, but other players continue to go at it. What does UBRA do in this particular case? Do you go after the employer and then create some kind of an environment of pressure so that they can actually act? How, just take us through how that can happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where an employer fails to remit contributions into a scheme, we have Section 69 under the URBRA Act that requires an employer to remit the contributions already due and even pay a penalty of about 10%. So this can be enforced both by URBRA and as the regulator against the several employers. And on several occasions we have written to those employers that are brought to our attention that they are not remitting to make sure they remit or face that penalty. And several times those that haven't remitted have actually been forced to remit that contributions that are due and even the penalty, the 10% of the due contributions. And you also talked about if a scheme is not performing well, what can the regulator do? We also have powers under the UBRA Act to put a scheme under interim administration. This would mean that the trustees step aside, then UBRA appoints an interim administrator that will run the scheme for that point in time to make sure.
Receivership, so to speak?
For companies, it's called receivership, but for retirement benefit scheme, it's called interim administration. Because those that are in charge have failed, they step aside, then another administrator is appointed to run the scheme to make sure that it's resuscitated and members don't lose out on their savings. Something
just skips my mind. There's a scheme that was currently taken over, or rather just a few weeks ago. I forget the name, but I think that is under the arrangement. All right, we just have 30 seconds. Anything we could have missed out as you do the wrap?
Thank you for this opportunity. What I can urge the public is to save for their retirement. Please save with all the licensed retirement benefits, at least one of the licensed retirement benefit schemes. And also, no, not all, at least one of the licensed retirement benefit schemes, in addition to NSSF. And also, it's important that you attend the annual general meetings of these schemes. Ask the trustees these questions, get to know how your funds are invested, how the affairs of the scheme are running.
All right, Ritah Nansasi, Head of Legal at the Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority, UBRA, helping us understand what the role of UBRA is, especially when it comes to pension reform. Many thanks for the perspective. We are now emboldened and informed to be able to make the best possible decisions when it comes to choosing who should be our player or package holder in terms of retirement benefits. That will do it for this discussion, and indeed the entire show for this Tuesday. On behalf of my colleague Priscilla Regina Naloga, and indeed on behalf of the team that is behind the scenes in ensuring there is a smooth flow in terms of being able to be your first choice breakfast show in the land, it's been a pleasure having your company. We shall see you again tomorrow. Have yourselves a lovely day.